We're here with Matthew Barber. Thanks for taking the time, man. Your fifth record, or sixth record, really.
That's right, yeah.
Self-titled, Matthew Barber, is out now. What made you decide to make it a self-titled record?
It was, well, I was having a hard time, settling on a title, and I kind of just decided to go back to the basics, really, and that's kind of what this whole album was. I recorded it all in my basement at home and played all the parts on it. It was a real sort of kind of insular home recording project where nobody even really heard what I was up to until it was done. And so of all my records, it kind of seemed the most appropriate one to just not even give it a title, or just have it be self-titled. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that you recorded the record at home and that you took the time to craft it and play all the instruments on your own. To me, it's a really intimate reflection on you and your emotion and your feelings.
Good. Well, I mean, I guess that's what I was going for.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd always wanted to make a record that way. I've always been, a guy who's been into home recording, and
right.
I've had, my 4 tracks and 8 tracks over the years, and it's a side of the whole music thing that I'm really into. A lot of musicians, they want to write songs and go and play shows, but they don't really want to be bothered with any of the technical stuff. And yeah, everyone's different, but I've always been kind of into that too. But especially, I have a bit of a fetish for like old analog gear too. So I just wanted to do a record that way and have myself kind of limited to 8 tracks, and be forced to keep it really stripped down. And doing it in the basement, there was no chance of getting any sort of big lush sounds anyway. So it's all very kind of, intimate, sort of close mic'd record for the most part. Yeah.
It's a throwback record. I mean, it is very much
so.
in the vein of like old Dylan records, or even early Rolling Stones records, where it's just you, your gear, and everything that you put into it, right?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously those are incredibly lofty, people to be compared to. I mean, I don't know. I'm inspired by the spirit of the sound of those recordings.
Right.
I mean, like songwriting wise and everything, I'm not necessarily going for the same things that they're going for, but definitely just in terms of the texture and the sounds and the approach to recording, where like things don't necessarily have to be super polished and super edited, and music, there's a certain, I don't know, I like the fact that you can't really edit, in detail on each individual. You can't really clean up all the weird sort of background noises on the different tracks on tape. I mean, you could, but it's a lot tougher to do it than on Pro Tools, and so you get a lot of that sort of just extra, it's rough around the edges, but I think it makes for like a kind of an interesting listening experience. Records that are made that way,
Since it's only you making the record, does it take a lot longer? I mean, to put it all down. I mean, 8 tracks, so you have to, besides vocals, you're singing on some of these tracks, and you're playing guitar, and there's some drums on some tracks, and there's some Hammond. Do you just have a Hammond B3 organ in your basement?
No, I borrowed an organ from a friend of mine, but
right.
The organ is, I have to admit that as much as I tried to do everything super legit on this record, the organ is a Nord Electro reproduction of a Hammond. So I don't think I've got space for a Hammond down there.
Yeah.
I do have an actual piano though, which to me is a really important thing to have when you're making. If you want to do piano, I don't know, I think there's still a big difference between a real upright piano, or grand for that matter, and a digital piano. But
it's funny that you mentioned the piano specifically, because a friend of mine who plays on your sister's records, Robbie Grunwald,
great.
he just advertised that he just bought this really old vintage-looking piano.
Yeah, he was telling me about it actually.
It's crazy.
Sounds like he got a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go back to you and
Sorry,
not Robbie.
What was the question again?
No, it wasn't a question.
Oh,
as
did it
much
take
as,
a long time?
Did it take a long time?
Yeah, well, it did take longer than most. I mean, usually when I've made a record, I've had the songs together, and I've maybe recorded some demos at home, and usually kind of rehearsed them a bit with whoever is going to be playing on the record with me, whatever musicians, and then usually we end up going into a studio for, like last record, it was basically for 2 days to do the bed tracks, and sometimes I've had like 5 or 6 days, but it's always in a pretty compact amount of time, and you just kind of bang it out. And there's something really exciting that way about just immersing yourself in making an album for like a week or something, and that's all you do. This one was a little different, and because I did it at home, I could sort of, the work schedule was a little more flexible, so it did end up taking longer, and I had the luxury of redoing things if I, if they weren't sitting well with me like a couple weeks later. So, it was a bit more spread out, and when you do things that way, sometimes you wonder if it's ever going to get done, but because you can, you know.
Go on
but
forever,
then eventually I had some deadlines, which helped me finish it.
It seems to me that the whole production process is something that you enjoy. Is that, have you considered producing other people's records, or are you?
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, I've dabbled in it. You
Yeah.
know, like I've produced and recorded a few projects in my basement for friends, bands, and stuff.
Right.
But it's all been kind of low key stuff. I've been recording some stuff lately with Doug Paisley. You might know him. I've got recording some new songs for him down there, but. Recorded, you know, a few things for Jill, and I don't know. It's something that I'm pretty much advertising my services now.
If you need a producer,
like I need people to ask me to do it, and I'm on board.
And that Doug Paisley record, he hasn't been in yet to chat, but it's got to win the Polaris Prize. I mean, it's just a beautiful record.
It is really nice, yeah.
Let's talk about I don't want to talk about specific songs because I find that if it's up to you and to how you interpret the lyrics of the songs, and up to the listeners, obviously, to how do they interpret the songs. But I find that there's a maturity in the songwriting. Is that something that you were cognizant of, that you took your time writing these songs? There's specifically a part in Patch in Your Jeans. No, sorry, I Miss You When You're Gone. I don't remember which of the two it's in, but I've been around the world. I've been to Hamilton and back. I mean, that's just clever, super songwriting.
It's
anybody who's done that drive so many times.
It's nice for you to say that. I mean, it's funny that like that's from Patch in Your Jeans.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a song that basically just wrote itself, you know. So I mean, it's like every now, you know, I think you can kind of hear that too. It's just got that sort of, it's light, you know. I'm not trying to, you know, change the world with that song or anything. But, you know, hopefully, sometimes just little simple things can sometimes be the most effective.
Yeah.
And they stick with people. So, I mean, it's cool that you picked up on that. I mean, it's basically just the truth. I actually did live in Hamilton for 2 years.
Sorry about that.
No, it was all right. It was about, it was before I moved to Toronto. It was 2000 to 2002. And I was doing a master's degree in philosophy at Mac, so I lived there for 2 years, and by myself in a one-bedroom apartment, and kind of went a little bit crazy, and you know, it was just like I had my head in books all day long.
Right.
So it was an interesting couple of years in my life, but yeah. So there's some truth to that. I have been to Hamilton and back.
All of the songs, as I mentioned, you know, really do show this passion for songwriting. Is that something that, you know, you've been at this for 10 years? Is that something that you think is evolving for you on an ongoing basis? Is it something that you're always doing, or do you just sit down and say, I got to bang out, you know, 5 songs in the next couple of weeks, or is it something that just evolves?
Yeah, I never really write on a schedule like that.
Yeah.
I wish I could. Sometimes I have for certain specific projects, like this thing called The Haunted Hillbilly, which I've been involved with, which is basically a musical. And so for that, I kind of had to, you know, lock myself in a room in the rehearsal space when we were building up the show and just say, okay, I need a song for this character to sing at this point in the show, and it's got to make sense with the plot. And that's the only time I've ever really kind of sat down and forced myself to write songs.
Yeah.
And actually, the results were really good when I did that. But in general, with my own stuff that I put on my albums, it's really like, you know, I'll have a good month where maybe I'll write 3 or 4 songs, and then sometimes it'll be dry for like 2 or 3 months.
Right.
I don't write anything, and you just kind of have to sort of feel that out for yourself, that natural kind of ebb and flow of songwriting. And you know, you kind of go through different cycles. Sometimes you're recording, sometimes you're touring, sometimes you're at home writing, and like they're kind of all different mindsets to me. So you kind of flow in between them throughout the course of your career, I think.
And then when you have enough, you sit down and you think, I'm going to put together a record, right? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, these ones I just put out a record like a little over a year ago, so. It's kind of, it's unusual to be putting out records so often these days, but I figured, I don't know, I just wanted to do it. I wanted to go for it, and you know, people have still responded well to it. I don't think anyone's told me that they're, you know, like, stop putting out records, Matt. So.
It's actually refreshing to see people not waiting so long between records, and actually, you know, if the material's right, putting out records. I think that's, you know, in the spirit of those artists that we talked about in the 60s and 70s who just made music for the sake of making music and putting out good music.
And I almost look at this one, you know, even it is being officially released on my label and everything, but I sort of look at it as a little bit of a not a side project. It's called Matthew Barber, but
Yeah.
just like a little bit of a departure from like my studio albums, where this
Right.
one was a bit more of an experiment to me, just
Yeah.
doing it at home to see how it would turn out. So I felt like, yeah, I'll put it out there and see what happens.
Good. You're touring throughout the summer, doing festivals and such. Is that the plan?
I'm doing a few things. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm heading out west a couple times throughout the summer. Just finished up a whack of shows with Oh Susanna. Well,
Right.
we've got our Toronto show tomorrow actually at the Great Hall. But we've been out west and just got back from a couple nights in Halifax.
Cool.
And, yeah, and then hoping to get down to the U.S. In the fall for a couple weeks, and then also going to be doing all the sort of central Canada, like Ontario and Quebec shows that I didn't really get to on this trip in the fall.
In the fall.
So,
Well, continued success, man, and thanks for a great record, and thanks for some great songs, and we'll see you real soon.
thanks for having me here.
Cheers.
All right.
Explore Music wears English Laundry apparel.